Hello everyone and welcome back to MixBuzz TV mixing and mastering tutorials on YouTube. I'm your host David, and in this video I want to talk about phase alignment and specifically time alignment. And what I'm about to say is probably going to be a bit controversial, and I know some people will agree with me and some other won't, and that's fine. There's more than a way to skin a cat, and different engineers have different methods. But because of that, allow me to say this before we dig into this. This is just my opinion, so don't take my words as gospel. The thoughts I have on phase alignment, time alignment, are the result of my personal experience and the many mistakes I made during the years. So as for my usual advice, use critical thinking, gather information, listen to different opinions, and then stick to what you think might work for you. So today we are talking about time alignment and phase, specifically time alignment on drums. And of course we are talking about real acoustic drums played by a human being and recorded with multiple mics. But some people use the same approach with VSTs, to my surprise, and so I will include that as well. I'm sure you're aware of many plugins out there that let you phase align different tracks, either automatically or they let you do it manually, giving you visual references on both the waveforms and the phase correlation meter. We all agree that different mics placed at different distance from the same source will give you tracks that are not time aligned. That's normal. Think about a snare drum. If we look at the close mic track and compare it with, let's say, the overhead track, we'll notice that the same event, the same snare hit, will be slightly delayed on the overhead track. That's normal because obviously the overhead mics are further away from the snare than the close mic. Same goes for everything else. The room mics will be even more delayed and so on. Now obviously different mics placed at different distances from the same source will always cause time difference, which causes phase cancellation to some extent. The most noticeable thing when a bad phase cancellation happens is that we lose sometimes a lot, bottom end. But depending on the distance and the room modes and many other things, the cancellation can happen not only on the bottom end. You can end up with comp filtering all over the spectrum. So in such cases, there is a problem. It was a bad mic placement. The artifacts are pretty obvious, and in those cases, to time align the track will bring an objective improvement. Keyword being objective. Objective is not a word I use lightly when talking about mixing, as everything is about taste and context, so almost everything in mix is relative. But by objective in this case, I mean true to the source. For example, if your snare sounded fat and big in the room, now it sounds thin and wimpy on the recording. But if you time align, the track goes back to being big and fat. That's objective, right? The question of the day is time alignment a mandatory thing that you should do by default? In my debatable opinion, not only no, but hell no. Time alignment is not necessary unless there is an actual problem in the recording. The time aligned sound is not necessarily the best sound. Why do I think that? Well, my thought process and what my experience tells me is when we time align, when there's no actual phase problem going on, we gain a bit of bottom end, but we lose depth. And simply put, it's a lot harder to get depth than a little more bottom end. Because that's what I feel time alignment does. It takes away the depth of the recording, which is given by the mics put at different distances from the source. Now, one important thing, time alignment is not exactly the same as phase alignment. There are many ways to time align tracks. You can do it by simply nudging them, looking at the waveform and listening, or with one of the many plugins out there that either do it automatically or give you a visual reference with waveform and phase correlation meters and allow you to delay or bring the track forward without actually moving the track in your sequencer, which is good because you might forget you did that and so on. Now, time alignment, so nudging tracks, changes the phase correlation between them, but it's possible to shift the phase of a track without nudging it, without moving it in time. For example, all pass filters do that. Plugins like Wave in Phase, I think, do that. So you can manipulate phase without moving, nudging tracks. So phase rotators, you can manipulate phase without nudging, moving tracks in time. And that's important because if you do it this way, if you can get away with doing it this way, I think what I consider the drawbacks of time alignment will go away. And depth might still be there, and you will still get the benefit of having more phase coherence between your tracks. So for example, let's take drums, the most common instrument where time and phase alignment is used. People often align the far mics to either the kick or the snare. This is my take on it. Don't do it by default. Don't do it unless, as we said before, there is an actual phase problem, meaning who recorded the drum fucked up. We know the easiest way to check if all your mics on the drums are in phase is to listen to them in mono. That will usually quickly tell you if there's something causing an obvious cancellation and if you need to move a mic. But if you didn't record it yourself and you're sent tracks to mix like me, unless there is an actual problem that you spot, I don't like to align. Like I said, to me, it takes out depth and that 3D sound the drum should have. Think about it. In the end, we put distant mics exactly to capture that depth, the room, and to capture what we hear where we are in the room where the drum's playing. Most time we try even to enhance that. Time alignment get us a little bit more bottom end, but then what? Like I said, to me, it's much more difficult to get depth and a big sound stage than a bit more low end. Now, the other things on drums is transients, and this will sound strange at first, but by aligning your tracks, you eat up headroom. How? Well, think about this. The general rule tells us that if two sounds happen within 30 milliseconds from each other, human beings perceive it as one. Now, in my opinion, 30 milliseconds is way too much. We can perceive a distinct delay way before that. At least I can. But we are all different, and some people are more sensitive to delay and some other not so much. But anyway, general rule tells us 30 milliseconds. Let's say we have our room mics 2 meters away from the snare. The same snare hit happens on the room mics with about 6 milliseconds delay compared to the close mic. And 6 milliseconds is not enough for the vast majority of people, if not everybody, to perceive a distinct delay. But being them not perfectly aligned, we don't have the sum of the transient at the same exact moment. You follow me? With digital editing, in this case, perfect time alignment, we are able to perfectly align those transients. And by doing that, we will increase the nominal level on that snare hit. Sure, like I said, it's probably going to give us a bit more bottom end or just a volume bump due to more phase coherence. But that cost us headroom because now the events in the different tracks are happening exactly at the same time. And most likely we lost that depth that we were trying to capture by placing the mics far away. While if we leave the room mics where they are, we keep the time difference, which is not enough for us to hear a flam or a distinct delay, but enough for the transients not to be at the same exact spot, not to exactly digitally sum and bump our level on every hit, eating up headroom. And I want to stress this. This is just my opinion, my experience. The delay thickens the snare. It makes a really fast event a little longer. So our ears can attach to it better, can recognize that better without having to turn the volume up necessarily. The event, the snare hit, stays up a few milliseconds longer than it would have. And that for me makes it fuller and thicker, as opposed to a really pointy, pingy transient that happens and disappears instantaneously. You know, the too thin snare with a lot of attack, a lot of snap, but no body at all. And if you think about this, we do that with reverbs all the time by adding pre-delays. Yes, we do that to avoid the reverb, to blur the snare hits, but also to thicken our snares. In the same way we stack snare samples. Different snare samples don't have perfect phase alignment. They can have perfect time alignment, but the envelope, the relation between the initial transient and the sustain are different from snare sample to snare sample. One envelope can be longer than the other, but by summing them, we get a thicker snare. So yeah, this is the same for me. Overhead and room mics in particular should be placed well, checked in mono for obvious phase problems, and then leave the timing alone. If a phase problem is there, then try all pass filters and phase rotators first, then time alignment as the last resource. And going a little further with this and thinking about other instruments other than drums, at the beginning I said perfect phase alignment is not always the best sound, which I'm sure will sound like bullshit. Because yes, most time perfect phase alignment is the best sound, but sometimes it's not. And here's some examples. 2 mics on a guitar cab. We do usually put them at the same distance, but no matter how precise we are, there will be minor time differences, unless we want to argue with the laws of physics that 2 objects can't exist in the same place at the same time. And in the case of the 2 mics on the cab, what we commonly do is to either flip the phase of one of the mic and move the other until we get the least amount of sound, or usually settle for a nasty piercing frequency. Then when we flip the phase of that one mic back, and the 2 are summed, that nasty frequency gets cancelled. So you see, we use phase cancellation as a form of EQ. Same example of the 2 mics on the cab. Other times we just keep the phase of both mics as is and we move the mics around till the 2 sounds good together. And sometimes that means slightly different distance or not perfect time alignment, not what we call perfect time alignment or perfect phase. Another example is bass DI or direct from amp and mic cabinet. That's an even better example because I'm sure many of you saw how different the waveform coming from the DI is from the mic cabinet track. So different that sometimes the peak and valleys of the waveform are impossible to match because they develop so differently. So assuming we are not happy with how it was recorded, we usually nudge one track until the 2 sounds good together, even if that's not perfectly time aligned. Many times we do use phase cancellation on bass DI and bass cab track to shape the bass sound, removing some boominess on purpose or too much sub energy, again using phase cancellation as a form of EQ. So this is what I mean when I say perfect phase or perfect time alignment is not necessarily the best sound, at least not all the times. But yeah, this is pretty much it. I want to say this once again. Most times, obviously, perfect alignment is the best sound, and definitely time alignment is needed when a phase problem due to bad mic placement happened. By aligning, for example, overhead and room mics by default, I don't like that. As I said, you might gain a little volume boost, a little bottom end, but I feel you definitely lose depth, and that's much harder to get. You can add a little bottom end with an EQ easily if you need to. So this also tells us that different sound doesn't necessarily mean better. Sometimes that's also what happens. We hear something different, something changing, and we might feel it's better because something has changed, but, not necessarily the case all the time. But this is my take on the subject. I used to align, so I did change my mind during the years, and who knows, I might change it again as technology evolves, but this is where I stand now. I know many engineers use time alignment by default, and they do that successfully. So again, there's more than one way to skin a cat. The end result is what matters, not how we get there. And that's a wrap. This is it for this video, guys. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about this subject, and don't forget to click a like button. Join us on Facebook and Twitter to stay in touch with us and get all the news about the channel, upcoming videos and series, and access to exclusive content. Please keep supporting MixBuzz TV by sharing the videos and spreading the word on blogs, forums, social media. Subscribe if you haven't already, and see you next time.